My name is Cole. I am 65 years old and I have learned that pride makes noise, but dignity moves in silence. The Thanksgiving that changed my family forever began like any other. Cold air brushed against my cheeks as I stepped outside my small farmhouse that morning. The fields behind my house shimmered under pale sunlight, and the trees had already surrendered most of their leaves. It was quiet, the kind of quiet I had grown to love after a lifetime of noise. Inside, a pumpkin pie cooled on the counter. It wasn't perfect. The crust was slightly uneven. The filling had a small crack across the top, but it carried memory. It carried my late wife's touch. She used to say, "Food tastes better when it carries love." I picked up the pie carefully and drove toward my son Daniel's house. I had no idea I would return home that night with something far heavier than I carried in. The house that sparkled. Daniel's home stood tall in an expensive suburban neighborhood, polished stone exterior, wide glass windows, a driveway lined with expensive cars. It looked impressive. It did not look warm. Vanessa opened the door. She was elegant, always perfectly styled, her hair smooth, her posture confident. She looked at me, then at the pie in my hands. "Oh," she said with a thin smile, "you made something." "Yes," I replied gently, "your mother-in-law's recipe." She nodded, but there was no interest in her eyes. Daniel appeared behind her. "Dad, come in." He hugged me quickly, distracted, already turning back toward his guests. I stepped inside. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. The table was decorated like a magazine photo shoot. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked intentional. And yet something felt missing. The conversation that cut. Dinner began with laughter and loud conversation. Vanessa's friends discussed business deals, international vacations, market trends. Words like portfolio, equity, and returns floated around the table like badges of honor. I listened quietly. Then someone asked, "So Cole, what keeps you busy these days?" I opened my mouth to answer. Vanessa beat me to it. "He lives a very simple life," she said lightly. "Very modest, retired early, small farmhouse and all." Her tone wasn't cruel on the surface. But beneath it, there was judgment. "Oh," one guest said politely, "that must be peaceful." Vanessa gave a soft laugh. "Well, not everyone is ambitious." The air shifted. Daniel shifted in his seat. "Vanessa." She smiled sweetly. "What?" "I'm just saying Daniel had to work very hard to build what we have. He didn't exactly inherit a business empire." The word inherit landed like a stone. I took a slow sip of water. For 40 years, I had built a logistics company from one second-hand truck. I worked through snowstorms, market crashes, sleepless nights. I missed birthdays. I missed anniversaries. I sacrificed comfort so my son could study in good schools and chase dreams I never had. When my wife fell ill, I sold the company quietly for a sum that secured our future, and Daniel. I never told anyone how much. I never felt the need. But at that table, I realized something painful. Silence can be mistaken for weakness. The word that broke the silence. After dessert, I stood alone in the kitchen, washing my hands. Vanessa walked in. She leaned against the counter, arms folded. "You know," she began casually, "Daniel has big goals. I just hope he doesn't adopt a limited mindset." I dried my hands slowly. "Limited?" I asked calmly. She tilted her head. "Settling for less, living small. Some people are comfortable being average." Then she said it. "Honestly, Cole, I just don't want Daniel to end up like a loser." There it was. Clear, direct. A word spoken without shouting, but sharp enough to cut. I looked at her for a long moment. At 65, you don't react quickly, you measure. "You believe success must be visible?" I asked quietly. She shrugged. "If you have it, why hide it?" I nodded. "Follow me," I said. The gates. Daniel and Vanessa drove behind my old pickup truck. We left the bright neighborhood and followed a quieter road lined with tall trees. After 20 minutes, we reached iron gates hidden by ivy. Vanessa frowned. "Where are we?" I pressed a small remote in my pocket. The gates opened. Their car rolled forward slowly. And then they saw it. A grand estate stretched across the landscape, white stone walls glowing in the afternoon sun, tall pillars framing a massive entrance, fountains flowing gently, gardens manicured to perfection. Daniel's voice broke the silence. "Dad, what is this?" I stepped out of my truck. "It's mine." The truth unfolds. We walked through the towering wooden doors. Marble floors reflected the light from chandeliers overhead. A sweeping staircase curved like a ribbon toward the second floor. A library lined with leather-bound books filled one wing. A garage housed vehicles worth more than most houses. Vanessa's heels echoed against the marble. This is impossible," she whispered. "I built a company," I said calmly. "Started with nothing, sold it years ago." Daniel stared at me as if meeting me for the first time. "You never told me. You never asked." The words weren't angry, they were honest. Vanessa's composure began to crumble. "But why live in that farmhouse?" she asked weakly. "Because I prefer peace over performance." I turned to face her. "You called me a loser." Her eyes filled instantly. "I didn't mean." "You did," I said gently. Silence settled over the grand hall. "What wealth reveals." "I could have corrected you at the table," I continued. "I could have embarrassed you in front of your friends." Daniel looked down, ashamed. "But wealth is not about proving others wrong," I said. "It is about choosing when to speak." Vanessa's voice trembled. "I grew up with nothing. People looked down on my family. I promised myself I would never feel small again." There it was. Her arrogance wasn't cruelty. It was fear. "I understand that," I replied softly, "but making someone else feel small doesn't make you big." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I judged you." "Yes," I said, "you did." The moment of realization. We sat in the living room, overlooking acres of land. Daniel finally spoke. "I thought you were just content with little." "I am content," I said, "because I learned early that money is a tool, not an identity." I looked at Vanessa. "True wealth is not what sits in your bank account. It's how you treat someone who has less than you, or who appears to." She covered her face briefly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And this time it sounded real. A different Thanksgiving ending. We did not return to Daniel's house. Instead, we sat there for hours. Talking, listening, understanding. Vanessa asked about my early struggles, about the nights I slept in my truck, about the deals that almost broke me, about the hospital bills when my wife was sick. For the first time, she saw not a simple old man, but a man who had built his life brick by brick. Before we left, I said one last thing. Respect should never depend on appearances. The quietest person in the room may carry the heaviest story. The chain. In the weeks that followed, something shifted. Vanessa visited my farmhouse, not the mansion. She brought coffee, she asked questions, she helped plant vegetables in the garden. She began to understand that simplicity is not failure. Daniel began calling more often, asking for advice, not about money but about resilience. The mansion remained mostly empty, because my heart was never there. What I know at 65. At 65 years old, I know this. Pride is loud, wisdom is quiet, insecurity judges, confidence listens. That Thanksgiving, I did not show my mansion to prove I was rich. I showed it to reveal a lesson. Because sometimes, the greatest way to correct disrespect is not with anger, but with truth. The moral: never measure someone by what they display. The simplest clothes may cover the strongest spirit. True wealth is character, and dignity will always outshine arrogance. My name is Cole. I am 65 years old, and the richest thing I own is not my mansion. It is my peace.